Forward. I never tire of hearing the beautiful message of God's unconditional love. I have witnessed firsthand its power, and I know that to perfectly describe it is impossible. Understanding this, however, I also recognize an honest attempt to put into words from one who has been there. Roy Mills' book, The Soul's Remembrance, is such an attempt. It deeply touched my heart. Since my near-death experience, my driving passion has been to share God's true nature and love with all who will listen. So when Roy Mills contacted me and began relating memories of heaven that he retained from before his birth, my spirit listened. I can be skeptical at times, but Roy's words touched me so deeply that I knew he truly remembered events from his pre-mortal life. He shared details that I had been shown during my near-death experience, things that I had never related publicly. Everything has a time, and I knew that the right time for sharing these truths was not when I wrote of my experiences. But I also knew now, in talking with Roy, that the right time had come. So I encouraged Roy to write his experiences, not knowing that God had already told him to do so. Later, I agreed to endorse Roy's book because I knew the comfort and reassurance his message could bring to many who are struggling to understand spiritual origins and missions on earth. However, after repeated submissions of his manuscript, he could not find a publisher. Their reasoning was that spirituality was a dying fad. But I knew, with the purest knowing, that his book had to be published. So I knelt in prayer and asked God to give me wisdom, to help me understand the feelings that had driven me to help Roy, and of the knowledge I had that his book should go to the world. It should not have surprised me then when the answer came loud and clear. I was to publish it. Would this simply be an act of faith on my part or a mission of its own? The truth was, I didn't know, but it made no difference. What I learned was that Roy's message and memories had to reach the world, and I was willing to attempt that responsibility. I knew little of publishing, even though 2 of my own books had been published. But I trusted that God would provide a means, and of course, He did. I found a publishing company under my Native American name. I founded a publishing company using my Native American name, Anjinjinkta, and prepared to continue the work I care so deeply about, sharing God's love. The Soul's Remembrance is a powerful book. Its message adds a witness to the great plan of God to sustain and encourage us in our paths back to Him. Roy's memories help us understand the purposes of life and of our own free will in choosing the events we experience on earth. He also sheds light on the absolute need for compassion for those among us who are challenged in many ways. With his unique insight, Roy reveals the purpose these individuals serve and why they deserve our full love and respect. Through reading of Roy's trials, we learn how the hosts of heaven, under the direction of God, help us to endure all things regardless of adversity or strife. Through Roy's eyes, we see that we are never alone, but are attended by angels who delight in serving and helping us. Roy remembers that a part of his mission is to share these memories to awaken us to heaven's reality. Heaven is the home we came from, and the place of light, love, and beauty that we will return to. This book is the answer to many prayers as it teaches the simple, beautiful truths of God's plans for us. This is something we will all want to learn, to share in the fullness of His love. Betty J. Eady. The soul's remembrance. Earth is not our home. The secret. For the first 44 years of my life, I kept my memories of heaven secret from everyone I knew. I never told my best friend, Bobby. I never told my parents or grandparents. During those years, I never even told my wife, Phyllis, or our children. It was hard to keep such a wonderful thing secret, especially from my dear wife. But while I was in heaven, before my physical birth, being trained and prepared for my earthly life, the angels gave me strict instructions not to reveal my memories to anyone, not a solitary soul, until I was told it was time to do so. It was to be part of my mission and purpose here on earth, a mission I requested of the Father, and He had appointed a time when it was right for me to share what I recalled of heaven. That time came in April of 1995. At the time, I was working at a lumber processing plant as a safety and security supervisor. The days are long and hot in southern Georgia, where I live. And after a hard day at the processing mill, I look forward to spending some time with Phyllis, to cool down and spend some time together visiting. We enjoy taking rides into the country to watch the sunset. That is what we did that night. The sunset that evening was beautiful, as only a South Georgia sunset can be. I shared it with Phyllis and let the cares of the day ease away. Afterward, we ate dinner at a cafe and talked for hours about how our day had gone. Back home, I felt pleasantly tired and decided to go to bed early. Phyllis has diabetes and other serious health problems, so she doesn't sleep well. I knew it would be hours before she came to bed, if she ever came at all. I went to the living room where she likes to sit, kissed her good night, and told her I loved her. She reminded me to say my prayers. I smiled at the gentle reminder and headed off to bed. It didn't take long before I fell asleep. Around 2 a.m., I was awakened suddenly when a voice called out, "Roy Mills." Light hit my eyes, but before I could focus them, I heard the voice again very clearly, "Roy Mills." I thought Phyllis had come into the room, but when I looked to my left, I saw a glowing arm extended through my closed bedroom door. I trembled at first, unsure of what was happening. But then I realized I was seeing something of spiritual origin, and my fear left me. As I watched, the room began to fill with a bright light. Then a tall woman with long, dark hair and crystal blue eyes walked through the door and came to stand by my bed. She wore what looked like a silk robe, and she glowed softly from head to toe. She smiled and raised her hand, pointing at me. I felt great, unconditional love flow into me, and I suddenly realized I knew this angel from my pre-birth life in heaven. Most people might assume an angel would appear sooner to the Pope, Mother Teresa, or Billy Graham than to someone like me. But angels will come to anyone as God directs them. I felt blessed by this visit from this angel, and I began to receive a message from her through a pure, simple method of communication. It was like telepathy, but was more than that. I could feel her words and emotions. Our minds were connected. Pure thought passed between us. Her voice was so sweet and filled with love and compassion. "It's time for you to write the book," she said. I immediately understood what she meant. The time had come. I immediately understood that she meant the time had come to share my knowledge of heaven and of my preparation before coming to earth. The only problem was that I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't even know anyone who could. How was I going to do it? "This is what you chose long before you were born," the angel reminded me. "Use the gifts you have been given." She pointed up toward heaven to remind me that God had already provided everything I'd need to accomplish writing a book. Her reminder made me think of Phyllis, encouraging me to say my prayers and remember God. Phyllis is my earth angel. She said that this message of our pre-birth existence would change the lives of everyone who would listen. It would help them understand who they really are. When the angel finished, she glided slowly backward and disappeared through the door that was still closed. I smelled a lingering fragrance of roses in the air, which reminded me of other angels who had visited me when I was much younger. As I lay there in my bed thinking about what I had just experienced, my memories of heaven became much clearer. Many things I had forgotten began to come back to me. My mind was going a mile a minute. I was remembering my life in heaven. It filled me with a wonderful sense of peace, and after a while, I became drowsy and fell back asleep. When I awoke the next morning, I felt compelled to write down my memories of heaven, something I had never done before. But I felt a sense of relief and joy at being able to finally record the memories I had kept secret all my life. I had been blessed to know so much of the purpose in coming to earth, and now I was being given the chance to share that blessing with others. For the next several hours, I sat at the table and wrote. I didn't take a break or even stop to eat. All I could think about was getting as much as I could down on paper. Now that my experience no longer had to remain a secret, the first people I told were my family members. I was glad to finally be able to tell them, recalling how the knowledge I had of heaven had helped me in my life. I was anxious for them to have the same comfort I had known for so long. I began sharing some of my memories with them the very next day. I took it real slow with my sons so as not to frighten them, but I held nothing back from my wife. I told her everything, and she was eager to hear about it. Since that day, I have shared my memories with a few more people and watched as the truths I am fortunate enough to share bring hope into other people's lives. Now I have the opportunity to share it with as many as are willing to listen, and I am pleased to do so. Sharing my memories is part of my mission, given to me by God, and I always try to do whatever the Father asks of me. Remembering who I really am and where I came from and the reasons for coming to earth has helped me through many tough times. and I know God will use my experience to help others as well. It is a simple knowledge that offers lasting peace. The memories I retain of heaven remind us of our individual value and purpose in the eyes of God, and they encourage us to seek joy and serve one another. Each memory fills me with warmth and comfort right from the beginning of my recollection. The first of my soul's remembrances is of being in a place of very bright white light. Even the people and angels there glowed with the same pure light. In fact, everything in heaven radiated light. It is impossible to accurately describe heavenly things with earthly language, because there just aren't words to describe them. All I can say is that heaven was the most beautiful place I have ever seen. I didn't experience any physical sensations like we do on earth. I was never hot or cold or hungry, and I didn't feel any pain. In heaven, we had spiritual bodies, like the Bible describes, instead of physical bodies. But I did experience many of the same emotions we have in this life: excitement, joy, caring, compassion, and most of all, love. There was always a lot of love everywhere, and it was a love greater than anything I can describe, full of compassion and caring, without judgment or conditions. Before birth into mortality, I saw that we were young spirits, much like children, and we needed to learn and develop in order to prepare for life on earth. Our training was like going to preschool. I can't say how long my training lasted, if it was months or years, because there was no day or night, and no way to track time like we do on earth. The angels often referred to time on earth, but they told me heaven was not affected by it. The building where I received my pre-birth education had a lot of rooms, and each one was for teaching me a specific thing. For example, one room was used to introduce me to people who would play an important role in my earthly life. Another room was where I selected certain life experiences and was taught about them. I don't know how many rooms the building had because I never saw them all, but it was huge. And I had several angel guides during my schooling to assist me in my training and education. But one particular guide stayed with me longer than the rest. She was a tall, beautiful angel whose love for me was particularly strong. She always wore a patient, kind expression on her face as she guided me through my education. Early in my training, my angel guide took me to a room where there were two young male angels. They liked to play around like teenagers, and they seemed to take great pleasure in making me laugh. They were great jokesters, but their jokes were all harmlessly amusing. They showed me how delightfully fun it was to walk through a wall, but they also took their role in preparing me for my birth very seriously. They taught me a lot, but the things they stressed the most were unconditional love, using free will wisely, praying from the heart, gaining knowledge and experience, and seeking truth. They said these were the building blocks of a good life on earth. I also think that part of the purpose was to teach me to enjoy life, to have fun. These two angels took me to a room in heaven and made the wall in one corner become transparent so I could look out on the clouds below. Lightning danced across the sky. The clouds stormed. The lightning danced across the sky as the clouds stormed. I loved the look of the lightning, and I convinced these angels to take me back there many times. They helped me develop a sense of appreciation and wonder for many of the sights and sounds I would come to know in my earthly life, as they taught me to appreciate them with a smile on my face. One of the most interesting and important parts of my education was being shown the life books. The young angels were the first to take me to see one. I wasn't sure what the life books were, but when I entered the room where I was to learn about them, they were impossible to miss. A heavenly light shone in the room, flowing from every corner, even from the life book itself. The book was very large and thick, as big as a small suitcase. It had an ornate cover and sat on a table about 5 feet tall. Just looking at it, my excitement grew. I sensed the importance of the life book and how special it would be to my training. The angels were always careful to not let me or anyone else touch the book. When one of the angels spoke, the book opened by itself to reveal pure white pages. In an excited voice, my instructor asked me, what I saw. I replied I did not see anything except blank pages. He told me to stare into them and concentrate. I did as he said, and watched in amazement as the book revealed events that would happen in my earthly life. Each page showed me one part of my life, much like a television, and then the page turned by itself. Later on, the angel who had brought me to meet the young male guides returned. She took over for them and stayed with me for the rest of my education. I sensed from the way the young male guides acted around her that she was an important supervising angel. She showed me the life book on several more occasions, and each time I grew in knowledge. The angel only let me see a few pages at a time, and then we would discuss what I had seen. I learned all kinds of details about my physical life, who my mother would be, where I would go to school, who I would marry, even when I would buy my first car. I had wondered what my physical body would look like in my earthly life. So when I saw it in the life book for the first time, I got very excited. Look, there I am. I kept shouting, there I am. Each time I visited the life book, it went further into my life. I was interested in seeing my physical body as it grew older, and that made my angel guide smile. Finally, I barely recognized my body because it had grown so much older and gained a lot of weight. Although I saw many events in my life from the time I was a baby until the time I was old, my guide did not let me see my own death or anyone else's. I'm not sure why such things are kept hidden, but I believe it may be because mortal men would be inclined to try and avoid death if they knew when it was coming. Each time we finished looking at a portion of the life book, the angel asked if I had any questions. I always had a lot of them, and she was always very good about answering me. If she knew the answer, she gave it to me very directly. This guide did not soft pedal or sugarcoat the truth. And if she didn't know the answer, she took me to other angels who did. The only questions she would not answer were ones about other people in my life. She told me that it was not my concern at that time. I suppose I could have asked more questions about world affairs, but at that time I was not thinking about other matters because I was so intrigued with my own upcoming life. On one occasion, there was one question I was sorry I asked: if I would come back to heaven after I died. She said, "It is up to you." That is what free will is all about. "What's free will?" I asked. It is each person's right to choose to do good or bad when they are on earth, she replied. To love or not to love, to help others or not to help others, to believe in God or not to believe in Him, to live in the light or live in the darkness. This concerned me. "Will I do anything so wrong that I won't come back to heaven?" I asked her. She answered, "I will show you in the life book." She took me back to the table, and as the pages turned, I saw all the mistakes and sins of my life. That's the only time I can remember feeling sad in heaven, and I began to get upset. I thought this was her way of telling me that I would not be coming back. "Don't be upset," she told me with great love in her voice. "You can change any of these things you have seen by using your free will, and the choice to return is always yours. The Spirit Father never turns anyone away once their earthly lives are over, because we are His children, and there is nothing we can do to make Him stop loving us. He wants all of us to come home, but He also honors the free will He gave us. Some people choose to live in the darkness after they die, and others are afraid that God will not forgive all the sins they commit. When that happens, God does not force them to come back. He just keeps loving them, hoping they respond to His love and choose to come home. The choice is always ours. I don't remember all that I saw in the life book. Probably it would not be good to know everything that will happen in my life. But I remember a lot, and much of what I saw has come to pass, just as the life book showed me it would. At one point, when my guide was explaining what I was being shown, I asked her how I would recognize those events once I was born. "You will recognize them as each event occurs," she replied. She then went on to explain what we call déjà vu. Most of us have had the experience of going somewhere for the first time and suddenly feeling as if we had been there before. Often we find ourselves in a situation that seems familiar, even though we have never been in that situation before. When this happens, it is not what it seems. There is a very good reason why the experience feels so familiar. On earth, most people call the experience déjà vu, the angel explained. But in reality, they are remembering something they were shown in the life books. A person's memory of pre-birth training may be removed, but their spirit never forgets. For me, these brief moments of déjà vu are fun, encouraging reminders of heaven and my path here. On earth, they remind me to make wise choices so that I can return to God. And they remind me to try and fulfill my mission of sharing my memories of heaven, something I've tried to do ever since my angel guide visited me in the April of 1995 and told me my memories no longer had to be kept secret.